Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the AME Food Testing Show. Today's guest is Amanda J. Evans, all the way from Australia. And today's topic is of particular interest to food safety officers, food quality managers, and food production managers. That topic is falsification of HACCP records. We have Amanda, who is a particular expert in this area. She is a food safety compliance specialist with more than 17 years of experience working with Australian and international food businesses. Amanda works as a contract trainer and food compliance auditor and continues a close relationship with the food industry through her business consultancy services. With food labeling and education as a specialty, Amanda assists food manufacturers to keep up to date with legal and business requirements, along with mentoring and other food safety auditors' experiences. Amanda's relevant experience, she's built a strong platform of skill and knowledge after initially working for 7 years as a food inspector for the New South Wales government and for the past 11 years in her own business as a food compliance consultant. She has a strong commitment to food safety and business improvement, and Amanda has had to develop and implement business tools to assist food compliance. She is additionally working as a food auditor and allows the most relevant and up-to-date information to be used as standards in certification, including WQA, the British Regulatory Commission, SQF, Spotless, ISO9001, Codex HACCP, and other types of training qualifications. As we look at Amanda's qualification, we'll see that she is a graduate of universities in Australia, where both the equivalent of a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. Amanda, are you available to update us on further progress in your career?
Thanks, Andy. Great to be talking to you today. So you kind of summed it all up in a nutshell there. After my university training, when I started to work as a food inspector with New South Wales Health, that opened up my eyes and the insight into food safety within the food industry. And then after my stint there for 7 years, I then moved on and started my own business in food safety consultancy, and have continued to update my qualifications along the way after completing a diploma in journalism, along with business, certificate, diploma in business in quality auditing, and keeping up to date with all the general retail standards and the courses that go along with that, which are compulsory to be able to audit to BRC, SQF, WQA, and other retail standards, McDonald's, Costco. There's all training programs that go with each of those. I'm also a qualified food safety auditor under RABQSA and have been so for the last 12 odd years, which allows me to audit in certain categories in the food industry. So that's about it in a nutshell, Andy.
Very good. Outstanding nutshell, by the way. Can you start our discussion, the falsification of HACCP records, with just telling our audience, we have some very experienced food safety and food quality and food production managers, but we might have a novice here and there. Briefly review, what is HACCP?
Okay, again, just in a nutshell, when I try and explain HACCP to people, it's really not rocket science. What it basically is, it's a food safety strategy or a business strategy that allows businesses to go through and identify everything that can go wrong in their business in relation to food safety. When they work out that side of things, they can then put in a strategy to make sure it doesn't happen to them. So that's about it wrapped up in one.
Very good. So given that that is a standard and HACCP is a science-based activity, what's a HACCP audit all about?
Okay, so like anything, I suppose, that we do, we want to have somebody check that we're actually doing what we say we're going to do. And a HACCP audit is really around that type of stuff. So when you get audited, you prepare your food safety program to meet certain guidelines or certain rules. And these are what we call, it can either be legislation, it can be a customer's requirements, a retail standard like your BRC, SQFs, Codex HACCP, things like that. So what an audit aims to do is assess your compliance against the rules of those criteria or standards, and basically seeing, are you complying, are you not complying? So that's kind of in what a HACCP audit really entails. And some standards will give you, like an overall rating, a percentage. Other ones it may be you're certified, you're not certified. So it really depends on what the standard requires.
Very good. As we think about a HACCP audit, what types of persons actually come out to a food production facility and conduct these audits?
Okay, well, again, it depends on the type of audit that you're having performed. So if in your legislation, HACCP is part of your legislation, you may have a regulatory auditor come out, which was what we consider a second party. If it's a customer-based standard and requirement, you'll generally have a third-party auditor. So a third-party auditor is someone who basically, they don't have any financial interest in your business. The only interest really is just getting paid to do the job. So the auditor just depends on what type of audit you are actually having.
Very good. So as we look at the type of audit, what types of documentation, and by the way, I'm kind of leading up, this is the core of our discussion today, what types of documentation are reviewed in a HACCP audit? Okay,
so there's for anyone who goes through a HACCP audit or who has a food safety program in place, that sometimes it feels like there's just mountains and mountains and mountains of paperwork. So we can kind of classify our paperwork into different areas. So we have your policies and your procedures of the business, so kind of like our guiding documents, and the procedures being how we actually do things within the business. And then we have the outcome of a lot of that stuff is the records. So depending on how strict the standard is or the requirements of the standard, that generally dictates how much paperwork, number one, you have to keep, and how many types of procedures and documents you actually have to have written down to start off with. So it can be quite overwhelming for a lot of people around document control. And part of that whole audit process is the auditor will come in and they will go through all of those documents and they will go through all of those records. So if you say, for example, you are going to monitor the temperatures of your cool room 3 times a day, the expectation is that you will have records to support that you are actually monitoring your cool room 3 times a day. So the auditor will look at all of that side of things. And the other side of it is if you have an audit, say every 6 months or every 12 months, the auditor really needs to go back to the last time you had an audit and review all of the records from that point forward. So if it was 6 months ago, they'll look at 6 months worth of records. If it was 12 months ago, they'll look at 12 months worth of records. So that's a general overview of records and documents within the business and what would get looked at during the HACCP audit. And they could be just quick examples, CCP monitoring records, so your critical control points, training records, pest control records, cleaning verification, your micro sampling, chemical analysis, visitors records, who's been into your premises, any maintenance you've done on equipment, quality records, so maybe you do assessments on how the size of your product, colour of your product, or the texture. All of that type of stuff will get reviewed during your HACCP audit if that's what the standard requires.
Very good. You know, as I think about all those documents you just mentioned, you included maintenance records, you included the equipment. You're talking about air conditioning records. You're talking about how many times they mop the floor, how many times the inspectors come out for pest or birds or insects. That's quite a number of documents, isn't it?
It is, and like I said, people can get very overwhelmed with the whole document and record side of things, especially if they don't have a good document management system in place. You know, I don't know, if you look at your own computer hard drive, if you get overwhelmed with how many folders you've got set up and the records on your folder, the documents on your computer, if that's just your own personal stuff, imagine if you've got all of the business documentation in there as well to deal with. It does become very overwhelming.
Well, that is certainly an excellent issue for food safety managers, and I'd like to raise this issue with you. As you've, Amanda, gone out to different companies, have you noticed that food production managers wear also perhaps the food quality manager hat, and then maybe they also wear the food safety manager hat? Have you ever experienced that, or they have different people for all of those jobs?
Again, it just depends on the business that you go to, but generally what you see, the QA representatives or personnel are overworked, underpaid. The expectation is they do a million things. They are generally the ones who are held responsible for the outcome of the HACCP audit, which I think is wrong in some respects, because HACCP and the implementation of HACCP within the food business is a job for everybody, not just the QA manager. So I do see it's a very under-resourced area, and it's generally the first positions that go when a business is looking to cut costs, which logically doesn't make sense, considering what the job of the role of the HACCP or food safety quality manager is.
Well, here's a question you've probably heard before, Amanda, and I've raised it with several other interviewees. Is a food safety auditor a policeman or a consultant?
An auditor is to be a policeman. The general rules of auditing is you are not to consult. Your job as the auditor is to go in and merely determine compliance with the set of criteria, the rules, or non-compliance. It's not your job as the auditor to go in and tell people how to fix their issues. Just looking at it from a liability point of view, if you did that during an audit as an auditor, you find an issue and then you tell them how to fix it. And if that strategy to fix it fails, who are they going to come back to? You as the auditor. So it's not good business sense. In the realm of being that separate, separate set of eyes, you've got to be totally separated from any type of business involvement with that side of it. And part of RABQSA certification as an auditor, you sign a mandate that you will not consult during that process. And generally because it's really seen as a conflict of interest. And all of our rules in Australia, and I know through BRC, SQF and the other major standards, have the requirement of not to have a conflict of interest. You can't be seen to have any sway. Your job as the auditor to go in, define, are they complying or are they not complying? So your role is really a policeman.
Excellent. That frames our next issue, which is what are the challenges associated with documentation? As we discussed before, this is really the nub of today's discussion, falsification of HACCP records. What have you seen in your 17 years, and what advice can you give to experienced and novice food safety officers?
Okay, so when I find records that have been falsified, I really try and ask myself, well, what is the reason why they've falsified the records in the first place? And there's many reasons why I've been told. I always ask the question as well. And for the people who want to be honest with me, they've really just come back and said, we didn't have time, we're not given the resources by management, we're not given appropriate funding. So the management commitment's really not there. And whether it's not there because of ignorance or because it's just not a priority, they don't see the importance of it. Or it may be that the QA manager has not been, say, assertive enough with management to let them know this is the importance of food safety and this is what we need, food safety and quality. So some of the things that I've seen over the years along falsification is the same person signs the records over and over and over and over again. It's really like they just work 24/7. They never go home. They're always there. So that generally can give you an indication that, oh, hang on, this person, unless they're a robot, it's really not physically possible. Another area is when records are actually filled out ahead of time. And this is one that I really find quite amusing as an auditor when I see this. And I ask the question, why have you filled these records 2 weeks in advance? And the general response is, well, that person's gone on holidays and nobody would actually fill the records out when they were away. So they just do them in advance like that. And it's records like cool room temperatures. So I wish I could have these people give me a call if they can predict cool room temperatures in a week's time. Maybe they can predict the lotto numbers for me. That would be really good. So, like I said, I always find it quite amusing. Another area is looking, it's just the old thing of the same pen, same handwriting. It's just quite, reminds me of at school when I write points out. When you put something out, not falsify records 100 times, you see, you get a certain slant with your records, things like that, the same pen being used, which, like I said, I find that quite amusing. Another one, which is probably a bit trickier, is generally with your documents within food safety, you have an issue date of a form or a document date for the form. Fill out these records, the dates that are prior to the date on the bottom of the form, so when the form was developed. So for example, the form might have been developed on the 18th of March, and then when you look at the dates that the records were entered, so-called entered, they go back before that date. So say the 20th of February and the 16th of December and the 9th of September. So that one's quite an obvious one. And as an auditor, I always look at the document dates just to see when or how long the form's been in place for. And I think probably our final one, which I've seen, is just mismatched record entries. So when we start looking at document records, don't actually match the indications on the equipment. So these are things like, say a thermometer reads to 0.1 degrees, but all of the entries are to the whole number or the nearest whole number. Same with scale records, weight records, they're a common. So that's probably the top 5 that I've seen over my years. And I'm not saying it happens every single audit I go into, but we do see that it happens. So, and there's always different reasons. But a lot of it is people just, maybe people are lazy. That may be one of the reasons. Maybe it is that they don't get given the resources. Maybe they haven't been trained appropriately in the importance of making sure records are filled out at the time of doing the activity. So it all comes back to what the standard requires. And if the standard says you have to keep records at the time of monitoring, well, that's what you need to do. And we're probably seeing a new emerging one coming through and it's probably a struggle with a lot of people, is how do you prove if you have an electronic record that it was actually completed at the time that you say it was completed at. So some computer systems allow like time date stamping of entry, but some other ones don't. So if you're doing an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document or something like that, you'd have to have some mechanism set up in the properties of the document which show when that entry was made. Just something else to back you up, really.
Well, Amanda, you're making an excellent point. I want to raise an issue that was raised in a recent blog entry on LinkedIn that was raised to you. And that was that, hey, Amanda, there's no crime committed here with these alleged modifications. I'll call them unauthorized modifications rather than falsifications. So what's the big deal anyway?
So it's probably more around due diligence. So depending on what your legislation says, and I'm only speaking strictly about the food safety arena. I'm not talking about business law or any other stuff. It's just purely food safety arena. If you had to go to court to defend yourself tomorrow, what evidence would you present to the court in your defence? Now, if you got up and said, we check the cool room temperatures every day, do you think the court will take that on face value? Maybe you'd like to test it in court.
Excellent point.
But I can probably tell you that it won't stand up in court. You actually have to have some other level of evidence, and this is what part of when I audit, we have to look for those levels of evidence. And I always audit with the thought that, okay, if I have to defend what I've looked at tomorrow, would I be able to do it with the evidence that I've looked at? So that's why we look at records, and that's why it's important to have the records. But also keep in mind, if your law or the standard doesn't say you have to keep a record, technically you don't have to keep the record. So that's why it's very important to know what the rules are that you're being audited to.
Very good. You know, Amanda, as I look at your vast experience, 17 years, all the companies and different types of organizations that you've audited, and your excellent list of potentialities, what do you think stands out as the most relevant to actually producing an unsafe product? I hear this a lot. Andy, a lot of these rules just simply don't relate to us producing X and that relating to harming someone as a result of a foodborne pathogen.
Well, I think, so are you asking like what I think, like how to produce safe food?
The issue is there are a number of rules in whatever standard. How do they directly relate to producing a safe food product?
Okay. Well, some of them, of course, I think I can't find the connection. I see a lot of the time that it's really about the customer, as in the big retailer, and the thing that they want done. If you really ask yourself the question, how does that, does that relate to food safety, or does it actually relate to something around business management, giving them the security or comfort that they're not going to get sued or they're not going to be prosecuted? We've got one in the Australian law, which I always find rather amusing, is in our food law it says that you have to have a minimum amount of meat in a meat pie. And that's actually food law. So when you think, okay, well, how does that actually, is it going to kill someone or hurt someone if there's only 20% meat in a meat pie? It's not. So when we look at what the intent of the standard is to do, I think some of the bigger standards have moved away just from pure food safety, and they've brought in quality, and they've also brought in business strategies and business practices, good business practices. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But when we just look at food safety, I really believe if you can comply with basic good manufacturing practices, basic hygiene practices, so these are things like things that you would usually see in your support programs or your prerequisite programs that support the HACCP process. Your pest control, keeping the place clean, making sure people don't spit in the food or sneeze over the product, making sure that the communication to the customer and your labelling is correct. That is, I think, the core of food safety, making sure the water's safe, when you look and see where hazards come from, they'll come from all of those areas. Hazards that come from pests, your micro-hazards. Micro-hazards are not cleaning something correctly. When you look at the causation of particular hazards, you can really bring it back to basic GMP. And I think that's what a lot of these areas we need to really go back and focus. And there's places that I do investigations in, and I always say you should really just concentrate on complying with basic GMP before you even worry about HACCP. Some people get that, some people don't. Go back to basics. If the whole intent is to produce safe food, go back to the basics.
Well, Amanda, I will review for our audience again. You were a food inspector with the New South Wales Health Department for 7 years.
Yes.
And can you relate some of the horror stories that you saw there and how that has been translated now in your auditing?
Well, yes, I have seen quite a few things in my time. I've seen rodents baked into products. I've seen other foreign matter in products that really shouldn't be there. I've seen, mainly around pest control, just running over the top of products, open products. And recently I had an issue where I was doing an audit, and this wasn't a compliance audit, this was against a standard, and I looked down on the ground and I saw these little cockroaches, which what we call in Australia, they're actually German cockroaches. They're smaller than the American and the Australian cockroaches, and they really love where it's nice and warm. I looked down on the floor and I saw one or two, and I thought, okay, if you see one or two of those out when people are around, you know there's a problem. And I kind of followed the line of where they were walking and went up the wall and up onto a pallet. And the whole top of the pallet, it was like a cardboard sheet on top of the pallet, was crawling with these German cockroaches. And I hadn't seen anything like that since I was a food inspector. And the first action of the company was to grab the forklift and move these pallets, which I found rather amusing because they obviously wanted to chase these little cockroaches. And I mean, there would have been thousands of them. They wanted to chase them around their warehouse. So things like that, I really think shouldn't be happening in, today. But different areas, different industries, you expect to see certain things. If you go out on the farm, you expect to see snakes and mice and things like that. And depending on the country of where you are and the level of food law around construction of premises, you'll see certain things. But it's a matter of how do you stop, say, in a pest point of view, actually getting onto the product. So you have your strategies in place from that side of things and pest eradication. So, outside of the general just absolutely filthy businesses that I have seen from a cleaning point of view, I actually dry reached and went out and vomited out the back of one premises when I was an inspector just because of the stench that was coming out of the drains. That was pretty horrific. So that business was eventually closed down. Some of the stuff I look over the years and I would think that I would be a lot thinner than what I am.
Well,
I should be a stick really, Angie, because I shouldn't be eating.
Well, I think that's relevant experience to go to our next question, and that is taking your food inspection experience and now converting that as an auditor. And we just finished our discussion about documents. What are some of the best practices that would avert a lot of those business practices that actually contaminate food? And in the area of documentation or record keeping, what are the best practices that you think that are out there you can suggest to food safety officers?
Well, I think, number one, if you're recording information, you really need to look at the way that your form is designed or formatted. I know it sounds very, very basic, but if your form is not designed or set out or formatted correctly, your workers or the food handlers, it's a lot harder to get them to fill in stuff. So I think a well-designed form, you know, you're going to cut 80% of your effort with having to educate your food handlers if your form is designed properly. The second thing would be training around why you have to keep the record. I think people are generally quite compliant in doing an activity if you explain to them why. Why do we have to fill out this record? What is the purpose of this record? And then also explain what the consequences are if we don't fill out the records. When I've been in this area before of trying to educate, and I'll go back to when I was a food inspector, I went into a particular place and it was absolutely filthy. And I went to the owner of the business and said, look, this is what's going on. Your place is filthy. I can't believe this is going on. We're going to do a closure order on your business until you get it sorted. And what he wanted me to do was actually go down and talk to his workers and to tell them this is what was happening. He said, because I tell them, but it goes in one ear and out the other. But I thought that was a bit of a poor effort on his behalf because he is the owner, he is the manager. He should be instructing his staff, managing his staff in a better way. So I went down and spoke to the staff, which the majority were males. It was in a bakery. And how I got them to turn around, I ended up saying to them, go through the conversation in your head now of go home to your wife and your family and tell them that you have lost your job today because you couldn't clean up after yourself. So it seems to be that one little, putting it into their context, we got the real change. Because I said, the business will be closed today and you will not have a job. So talk to your wife about that. And it was only just basic cleaning. So when you look as a QA manager or a food safety officer, education, I think, plays a massive part in it. Tell your workers why they have to do it. Explain to them. Explain to them in whatever manner that you need it for them to start. And the other side of it, I think, for QA managers is for anything to get done, you've always got to go back and check. If you instruct somebody to do something and if you don't go back and check, just human nature, someone else's work or issue will be a priority above yours. So you need to go back and you need to check, have they filled it out? And that's one of the parts of verification within HACCP is with records, you go back and check that they have been filled out. Were there any issues identified? What was done about it? So if that's what your role is in QA, you need to make sure that you make the effort and make it a daily habit to go and check those type of things. Because if you let things drag out, people don't, they have the attitude of, well, nobody's going to check the records, so what's the big deal? Why should I even bother filling them out? So education plays a big, big part in it. So out of the two for documents, I think your formatting to make it easy to fill out, and also the training in that area. And I might also say that for QA managers, take the time and actually review your records, as in the forms, and have a see what information you're getting people to write on each form. And on each of them, try and relate it back to, okay, why do we need to keep that information? Do we need to keep that information because the standard says we have to, or the law says we have to, or it's a business requirement? If it doesn't fall into any of those three, you've got to question why are you keeping that information. So that's probably my top three of best practices.
Excellent. You know, as you were talking about your suggestions, I just thought, Wouldn't it be great if food safety managers held a talk at least once a month during the food or the general employee talking talk about these types of issues so they can develop a culture, set a time, once a week, once a month, when they can develop that culture. What do you think of that idea?
Oh, absolutely. And it's about that communication side of stuff. And management needs to commit to that process. But whether you go around, depending on how big your business is and how many employees that you're responsible for, the QA manager, if you set a schedule of, okay, this week we're going to educate about this, or this month we're going to do this, and you can do it around, it doesn't have to just be face-to-face. Like I've been into some places and they have like a topic of the month, and you'll see stuff about this topic on the back of toilet doors, on the walls. They'll have like a little video presentation. They bring it up in their toolbox meetings. But it's like a five-minute message type of thing. So it doesn't have to go on for hours and hours and hours. And I think the best, like when we train people, we need to have short, sharp, clear messages. This is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, and this is what you need to do to make this successful.
Very good, Amanda. As I was recently conducting an audit, I asked, well, how many times does your food safety officer just walk around the plant? And use this as a guide, this inspection list, rather than once a year. And I hate to use this term, but I call it a walkabout. As our Crocodile Dundee film teaches us.
Oh, goodness me, Andy.
But don't you think that's a good idea for the food safety officer to occasionally, at least once a month, walk through the plant with those eyes?
It should be happening every day, every week, not once a month. Once a month, yes, go around and do a GMP audit, but you can walk through the factory, take half an hour out. You don't have to record anything, just do it as a general observation, see what people are doing. Are they washing their hands? Are they wearing their hairnets and things like that? You can go around and look at records on the line. It's a half-hour activity that if you schedule it in and make it part of your day or part of your week, maybe you do it a couple of times a week, it just becomes behaviour. And then they see you there, they're more likely to comply with what you need them to do, as in your workers see you're out checking, people are more likely to do it. And if you find an issue around your documents and your records when you're walking around, you can nip it in the bud now. Don't wait for the audit process to then do something about it. You can sort it then and there, move on to the next thing. It's a lot easier.
Well, Amanda, we've had an excellent discussion. I believe that those that are new to the business of food safety and those that are experienced, perhaps a food quality manager or even a food production manager that's been saddled with this responsibility, has learned something today. I'd like to allow you the last few minutes to review your consultancy's products and services, and feel free to be as explicit as you can be about your services.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for that, Andy. Probably our main site is HACCP website, haccpmentor.com. So it's HACCP mentor, mentor.com. If you head over there, you can sign up for what we're having putting up is as like a HACCP library. So it's free to go and join up. All your resources to help you as a QA manager, especially around validation, is in that membership area. Other than that, we also have our training business and our online training business at foodbusinesstraining.com. Hopefully that's easy to remember. And we actually offer training programs that you can download which go in line with BRC, SQF, other basic GMP compliance, that you can train your staff. And we try and make all of our what we call web seminars run for under 10 minutes each. You can actually get your staff They can watch it offline. They can watch it online. It's entirely up to you. Probably our biggest thing is about education. We do a lot of free education, and we'll have a lot more coming up in the foodbusinesstraining.com website around these areas in the coming months. But our primary one is HACCPmentor.com, and you can go and get up to date, see what's happening in the industry. Food recalls are a great place to start, just to see what's happening outside of the food industry. So we've got our site there, foodproductrecalls.com as well. You can all access that off the HACCP Mentor site. So that's about it in a nutshell. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop me a line, send me an email, give me a call, and I'll see if I can help you. That's what I try and do. So thanks very much, Andy, for the opportunity to be able to talk with you today.
Well, Amanda, I will concur, I think, with anyone who's listened to this show, that you certainly offer a great deal of content and value to the food safety community. I have actually had experience with a gentleman who actually comes from Mexico to audit food factories in the United States. Have you ever had the opportunity of coming from Australia to the United States to review a food audit operation?
I haven't audited over in the States. I'm hoping to get over there in November for the SQF conference. My other areas that I have audited is mainly New Zealand. I was over in Samoa, which is an island. It's about a 5-hour flight here from Australia in the Pacific Ocean, around Fijian Islands, things like that. That's about that area that I've gone into from an audit point of view. I've got enough on my plate auditing in Australia and training in Australia. And I quite like being in Australia as well. But hopefully I'll be over in the States in November.
Well, that just attests to the global nature of food auditing and the standards that are applied, and how we all need to be supervised and audited.
Definitely.
Well, Amanda, I'd like to thank you for your time and the excellent contribution, and allow you your closing remarks.
Oh, well, again, thank you very much for the opportunity, Andy. It's been great, and as I said before, if anybody's got any questions or things like that, please just give me a call or send me an email at amanda@haccpmentor.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. My profile's there as well, and I'll get Andy to put something in the show notes just for a contact from that point. And also you can find HACCP Mentor on Facebook. That's our general connection. I think we've got a YouTube channel as well where we have videos as well.
Very good. Amanda, thank you for your time, and we'll look forward to perhaps having you back on the show in a future time.
Excellent. I'd love to, Andy.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye now.